It is my pleasure this afternoon to welcome Caroline Heider to IPDET and to introduce her to you. She's going to be talking to you about evaluation power and responsibility. Caroline is, as many of you know, this is like, I think, old home week for her. She knows so many of the people here. She is the very new Director General of Evaluation for the World Bank Group. And her tenure, she's only been in place for, I think it's 9 months, is rather historic for many of us because it's the first time that we have someone who considers themselves a professional evaluator who is in the position of Director General Evaluation. And it makes a large difference. We are thrilled to have someone who practices and has had a career in monitoring and evaluation at our helm. And it's significant, and we can sort of see the different perspectives that she brings to the position already. Caroline has been in many organizations and honed her skills in them. I think she started off as an auditor at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And many have started as sort of performance auditors. She has experience in IPDET, the International Fund for Agriculture Development. There she was a deputy director of the Office of Evaluation. She worked in the Asian Development Bank, probably the longest tenure, about 10 years as an evaluation specialist. And the World Food Program, where she served most recently as the director of evaluation. So she has a long history and experience with evaluation, particularly in these multinational organizations. I think her experience made her almost a natural trajectory for the Director General position at the World Bank Group. And again, we're just thrilled to have her there. You might also be interested to know that she is a Canadian citizen. Well, Caroline has grown up in Germany and lived many places all over the world. She is an official Canadian citizen and proud of it. And so sort of her National Day was very recently as well. And one of these years, maybe we'll have her up and she'll get to celebrate it. So without further ado, let us join me in a real IPDET welcome for Caroline.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. As Linda was saying, I've been in the field of evaluation for a very long time. This is now my 6th organization, and if you count the World Bank Group as the 3 or 4 institutions it is, and makes it up for 10. Throughout, I have always worked in evaluation, so I have a very wide network, and there are quite a number of you who actually know me from previous positions, and some of my colleagues from IEG are here as well. So for me, these events, whether I go to an evaluation association meeting or a meeting of the bilaterals, the UN or the multilateral banks, are like family gatherings. I always connect to people I have enjoyed working with, and I'm very happy to extend that family through the occasion of IPDET. IPDET is the prime evaluation course. It is the prime course that pretty much everybody wants to do. There is a long list of applicants, And I know that also after the course, the participants form a network where they stay in touch, they stay connected and keep on working with each other. So it is a very strong community of practice, and this is something that was very much needed when the course was started 10 years ago, because the evaluation profession is fairly new and it is evolving and really becoming a profession. I had to think quite a while what I wanted to talk to you about today, because you are in the last week of a very intense program. Some of you have actually stayed the whole period. Some of you have joined more recently. Many of you are practitioners in the field. And so, and you have had courses by excellent people. Michael Quinn Patton is here, Charles Lusthaus, and I couldn't, mention all of them that have given courses. So, I was reflecting on what would it be that would add a little bit something different to your perspectives. And I thought one topic that we evaluators quite often deal with, but we don't necessarily talk about or think through, is the question of power and responsibility. When you think of evaluation, and you can put yourself in the shoes of an evaluator or of the person whose program is evaluated, there is one response to that power, and that is fear, that is controversy, that is defensiveness. We evaluators have all experienced that when we come out with an evaluation report, there is a strong pushback. And this fear derives very often from a sense that the evaluation could do harm, which leads us to the whole point of our responsibility of not doing any harm. Misinformation can be harmful to people who are operating programs. At the same time, the positive side of the power of evaluation is that it is a tool to inspire learning, a tool to inspire accountability, a tool to ensure informed decisions are made. These decisions might still be driven by political choices, but at the same time they can be better informed. And we see quite often that decisions are made and choices are made without actually knowing what the consequences are. If we think back, say 20 years ago, when there was less experience, when we had less evaluation evidence, it's more understandable that people would make choices without knowing necessarily what is the consequence. Development has been underway for many, many years, 20, 30, 40 years, if not longer, and there is a lot of learning that could be taken up and sometimes does not get taken up. So this is where the power of evaluation lies, and it sits in this tension between, inspiring fear and a negative cycle of defensiveness, which I have to say sometimes evaluators get then engaged in as well and defend their work, and then there is a tug of war about who is right. And the positive cycle of where the learning and the improvement is happening, and which is really the reason why we do our work. That's why we do evaluations. We want to see that the development effectiveness of our institutions improves, and that is whether it is an institution and multilateral, and Linda is right, my entire career has been in multilateral institutions, but it is the same for national institutions, research institutions, and so on and so forth. So I think from the coursework you've been doing, you would have realized that this is something that would probably apply to you as well. So where does this power of evaluation originate from? One is the authorizing environment, at least at the World Bank, that's what we call it. It is that we have the authority bestowed on us by our executive board to evaluate and judge whether things are working or not working. Many of the multilateral development banks have the similar setup, that they are independent of the management and they report to the board. But you would have a similar arrangement, for example, in national context, where sometimes it's with the parliament or the national planning office, the prime minister's office, who says, I actually want to empower a group to give me an independent assessment of what is working and what is not working, because I need to understand that. In other contexts, it could be that within an institution, the head of that institution, the president, chief executive, the minister of the department, wherever you may be working, is requesting similar information. This is less independent, but that person has an incredible role to play in order to create an enabling environment for critical thinking and reflection. So that is sort of one level that gives us power. We are authorized to look at things that people who actually do programs might not want to be looked at, and they cannot say no to this. So just think of it, if you put yourself in that position, you would realize that if there's something that is dear to you and you want to protect, and somebody else has the power to look at it, that can be quite frightening. The second area from where we derive our power is that we cast judgment. I normally don't like using this word because I prefer to use the word evaluation, where we, however, still come to a conclusion where we say what has worked, what has not worked, what is good, what is not so good. And that is in some institutions like the World Bank Group, like the other regional banks, we give ratings. It's a bit like in school. In the UN system where I've worked, some give ratings, some don't. But regardless of whether there is a rating, you do have the power to say you are good and you are not good. And what does that inspire in people? It inspires in people a fear that when they get a negative rating, that they will lose face, they will lose their jobs, they will lose funding. So there is a lot of fear associated with that power to rate. And again, therefore, there is a lot of responsibility that rests on our shoulders to put together evidence that is so well grounded that we are not making a misjudgment, whether it is a rating expressed in a number or in a word or in a description of whether something is a success or a failure. There is the power that comes from independence. This is closely related to what your authorizing environment is. And on a negative level, you can exercise that independence, depending on where you are and how much independence you have, as something like, I can do what I want. I'm an evaluator. I judge others. Nobody can judge me. That would be, in my view, an abuse of power. On the contrary, the reason why we have independence is to empower us to impartially evaluate what a program has achieved or not. The impartiality is a responsibility that means we should not be taking sides. We should not be just looking at the problem from one perspective. We should not be approaching it from, this is my opinion. I'm an evaluator, and therefore my opinion is what the evaluation is all about. What you've been learning here is tools and techniques of how do you generate evidence that would support any conclusion on how well something is working or not. So that is where a very powerful tool sits again, and a great responsibility, because when you're an independent evaluator, you are outside the realm of the person who is managing or designing the program. to say, no, this is not how I see the world. They can say that, but you have still the power of the, so to say, the last word. And the final part is the expert power, the expertise. And here we can have a situation where we sometimes are in competition with the experts who design the programs. So here's somebody who is a power sector expert and says, but I know how to do this. Who are you as an evaluator to tell me that this is not right and this is not working? Or in the governance area, in any sector you can have that. However, there is the expert power of the evaluator. And this is, again, one reason why you're here. What you're acquiring are skills, knowledge, tools to exercise the evaluation profession in a way that you acquire expert power, that you are as objective, as impartial as you can be, that you're using methods that are as appropriate as they must be for evaluating and coming to a conclusion on what you're evaluating. The other sides that we sometimes or very often don't teach, and I must say I don't know the IPDET program entirely, but the other skill that is very important for evaluators is how do you actually communicate and relate to the people who are managing a program? How do you convey messages? Invariably, as evaluators, we find things that are not perfect. And so how do we relate that to people? Do we do this in an ethical way? Do we do this with respect? Because people have invested their time and effort to accomplish what they have accomplished. They have, from their perspective, done their best. And so do we come in and just simply tell them, well, that was all not good enough? Or do we find ways to do this in a constructive way, where we say, you've made an effort. Where you've fallen short are these and these areas. If you really want to achieve your objectives, your goals, this is what you need to do further. And that is a skill. If you think of it, you need the technical expertise of the field that you evaluate. You need the evaluation, the analytical skill of the evaluator, and you need this people skill of relating to people. If you can combine all of these three and are motivated by the principles of evaluators, of impartiality, of speaking truth to power, you are in a very, very, very powerful position, because then you can influence by convincing people. The other forms of power that I've spoken about, you know, if you say, I have the authority, the higher authority has empowered me, entitled me to tell you that you are wrong, this is a, so to say, an old model of power. When you think back 50 years ago, you know, or even further, societies worked in a completely different way. They were very authoritarian. When you had power of position, you could tell and command people. When you look around the world now, very few people actually want to be told what they should be doing and whether they're right or wrong. It's much more powerful to convince people and convince them with evidence that there are better ways of doing things and that it is actually for their good that they would be doing and working differently. So this expert power is something that we need to foster in the evaluation community. IPDET is one of the cornerstones in doing that. The training you receive here from renowned experts, from people who have practiced for a very long period of time and are very respected, that's the reason why they're a source here and why they're teaching. Obviously, what we hope you take away are the toolkit, but also the ethical principles of being an evaluator. And what we hope you do is join the community of evaluators that we can jointly work towards a higher level of professional standards, which is another sort of frontier that we as evaluators have to explore and conquer, where the definition of what our standards are, what our competencies are, will define what the profession stands for and how it can progress. maybe some other things related to the expert power. I mentioned to you the combination of technical, analytical, and interpersonal skills, the methods, the tools that we need. The other part that sometimes evaluations fall short of is understanding or explaining why things have worked or why things have not worked. We quite often come to the point of describing whether somebody has reached the goals or not, but what has happened? Why is it that there was success or failure? And that is where the learning occurs, and where, again, I believe you would have acquired tools during this course that would help you practice as an evaluator. So with closing, I would like to say this is the importance, and what I wanted to convey to you is very much the combination of, yes, we have power. Let's be very cognizant of that power. Let's think about what power model are we actually pursuing? Are we speaking from the position of an expert, or are we speaking from a position of I am the evaluator and therefore have power over you? And then how do we move out from a negative cycle of defensiveness into a positive cycle of learning, where our responsibility lies in making sure the other party does not necessarily get defensive, even though that's the automated reaction, and we deal with that every day and all the time. But then let's not engage in that. Let's not get into that same cycle, but think about how do we move out of that cycle, because ultimately what we want to achieve is change. We want to influence change. We want that development work performs better, for better results for the people that these programs, policies, and projects are supposed to serve. So with that, I invite your questions.
You can see she is approachable, articulate, and very thoughtful and profound. And I think those qualities are going to and have made for excellent leadership. And again, we look forward to where this will take the independent evaluation group of the World Bank.
Hi, I'm Cecile. I work in the IPDET evaluation office. I have two quick questions. One is in relation to how you manage the relationship with your stakeholders. How do you involve them from the beginning instead of just managing, the surprise effect at the end? Like, I know the bank has a policy that 2 weeks in advance you would give a warning before the evaluation report is published, but I think that's like the extreme end. I would think we would try to involve people all along, so I'd like to hear you on that. The second question is about the rating in relation to what you discussed. I found the rating to be a real issue when you want to take into account all the other factors that came in that make that project, perform badly. And there may be some very good reasons, but you as an evaluator, you have to be accountable and tell the true story. So if the program didn't achieve its objective, you have to say it. But there are so many factors that actually have been beyond the control of the program managers that make it negative. So how do you rate it? Do you still have to say the true story and give it a negative rating, or do you take these factors into account? So you can have it in the text, but the rating will where people will focus. So, as a parallel for performance management, people say you can put the rating, not so negatively, because what you try to do is to encourage people to perform better. So maybe you give a good rating, but then you have a discussion on. So I just want to hear you on those two things. Thank you.
We'll take 2-3 questions at a time. So come on.
Thank you very much for this very clear and inspiring lecture. My name is John Ogwang. I work with the Nile Basin Initiative, covering some 10 countries in Eastern and Northern Africa. This is about the learning part of the evaluation. I'm one of the good readers of the independent evaluation group case studies, which you have in the internet. Quite often, I see quite a lot of interesting case studies from national perspective and from sector-specific perspectives. My question is, to what extent are these lessons really taken on board? Or put it in another way, does the independent evaluation group actually monitor to see whether some of these issues which are brought forward, which are really crucial, are really taken on board and they inform the next generation of development programs? Because this also boils down to our own work we do in our evaluation. We do churn out lots of useful recommendations, but sometimes to have them taken on board is something very tricky, even if you try very well to communicate them nicely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm UNEP Evaluation Office. You talk a lot about power that evaluators have, but evaluators are quite frustrated in their work nowadays, so it's the frustration of evaluators that I guess has a lot to do with the lack of a learning culture within an organization, but sometimes also the timeliness of the evaluation that come too late in the process. So I would like to have your view on what we discussed with Michael Quinn-Patton in the last few days, the role of evaluators in the debate, independence versus participation, developmental evaluation versus traditional, let's say, evaluation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. Let me start with Cecile, and I think the relationship with stakeholders actually links very nicely up with the question that Anna asked about, how do you make evaluations more learning oriented? It very much depends on what type of evaluation you undertake. If it is an independent evaluation, you do want to and seek interaction, but you still have to retain your independence and make sure that you don't end up just looking at the questions that are convenient for the people who have designed and managed the program that is being evaluated. That doesn't mean that you should seek isolation. In my own evaluation work, and I'll give an example from the Asian Development Bank, I was managing undertaking an evaluation of a country program, and we had regular interactions with that country team at the time when we designed the evaluation, and then whenever we had sort of broken it down into several thematic case studies, and at the end of each of those, we had a debriefing workshop. So people were already aware as we were doing the evaluation what some of the findings were, which way things are coming out, and so on and so forth, so that when we then consolidated everything in one final report, this was then more palatable. And we focused then more on the issues, on the development issues that mattered in that country. It was not anymore about the famous ratings that occupy a lot of the discourse. It was really about, okay, fine, if we want to make a difference in this country, what is it that we need to do? So it's a matter of finding the right line of engagement and without losing your independence, if it is an independent evaluation. In the World Bank Group, there is a very large body of self-evaluation. We call it self-evaluation. Some of the World Bank Group colleagues say, well, it's not entirely self because we hire consultants to do this, so it's not ourselves who do this. That do, their completion reporting, which is the end of project evaluation of what has been accomplished. The World Bank Group does a lot of impact evaluations. These are all done by our colleagues on the operational side, and so they decide on the indicators, they decide on the questions that they want to answer, and they should be, and hopefully increasingly will be, designing those evaluations to inform their choices. So that is where the learning is automatically built in more, because it is done by the programs that are also managing the program, managing the evaluation. So those are far more emphasizing the developmental side. The question of ratings and how to deal with other factors that play a role, and I agree with you completely. I mean, ratings occupy the whole discourse. I've had experiences, whether it was at the Asian Development Bank, at IPDET, and now at the World Bank Group, where the person receives the report and doesn't even look at anything except for opens the page where the ratings are and looks at the number. And in all these cases I've said, have you read the report? And obviously they know that I know that they haven't, because the time lapse between us sending it and them coming back is too short. And then they go, they're like, okay, I see your point. And they go back and read it. But the problem still stays, that the sort of occupation is about that number. It's a bit almost like in a school exam where people sort of focus so much on what's written on the diploma at the end of the year, rather than on what have I learned from this? What do I know more now after having read the evaluation? What is the answer to this? I don't have the answer yet. I think it is a fundamental question we have to work on, but having also worked in organizations where we had no rating. In the World Food Program, we didn't do ratings. The executive board asked me, you've come from IPDET, which is completely rating driven, are you going to introduce ratings? And I said, only once I know that the quality of the evaluations is such that whatever ratings you get are actually based on evidence and not just a number coming out of a hat. And nonetheless, you still had that same discussion, because whether you put a number or you put an explanation of how well a program did, this is where the tricky part is. So is the answer that we just do learning evaluations where we don't critique or we don't say anything about things that haven't worked? I personally don't think so, because the learning is derived from the accountability. We are not in a research operation where we can just go out and look at, you know, something and say like, oh, look at this is an interesting observation we're making. We want to learn about that. We set out at one point and we want to get to another point, and whether we do get there. And so therefore the accountability part is for me very much associated with it. If we find the magic answer, I will certainly be speaking more about it, and will let all of you know. The question, sorry, I forgot, there, yes, about do we actually trace what happens after our evaluations? In IEG, we have a very sophisticated system. It's called the Management Action Record. As a matter of fact, in WFP and in IPDET, we had similar systems, and actually also in the ADB, where we look at, okay, we issued these recommendations, so what is happening as a consequence? And management has to report on what they have done. In IEG, we track recommendations over a period of 4 years. And then we retire recommendations. So not only people retire, but even recommendations do get retired. And we've done a little bit of a follow-up study of trying to understand why some evaluations were more influential than others. It was a very initial review. We're not yet happy with that, but we're even thinking of doing an evaluation of how well our recommendations were taking hold. Some of this, you don't even need necessarily such a sophisticated system to analyze. Some of it is in the corporate culture. And how you get traction, it depends very much. Like in some institutions, you get a very strong reaction. They will be shouting and saying like, you got it all wrong and we don't agree with this and whatever. And then 2 minutes later, they'll start talking about what they're going to do, and it's everything that you've recommended. But they need to make that noise so to preserve their self-esteem or something, I don't know. In others, it's more that you work behind the scenes and you sell this idea to them as if it's their own, and then suddenly you see it take off, you know. So there are various avenues to how you can influence change. And I agree with you, we need to think about how we evaluate evaluation and our own effectiveness. And it starts with having a results framework of what change we want to achieve, and goes through to having actually more formal assessments of whether we actually get there.
I'm Susan Tamandong, and Caroline, I'm very, very proud of you. Caroline and I were in the same office in ADB many years ago, and I am so thrilled to see her, and I even joked her that Her Excellency. So I have this question about ethics. Caroline mentioned about the evaluator having the power to judge, and ultimately we have to be ethical in order to not to misuse that power. I wanted to ask you, is there a way where evaluators could be judged, and by whom? So the accountability on the evaluator side, because that has been always the problem. I can even cite an example where, as evaluator, we are judged by the person above us. And if our peer group thinks that our evaluation is good, but our superior does not agree with us, who is the ultimate judge? Thank you.
I had a question on, you just mentioned corporate culture. Given the fact that you worked in a number of multilateral and international organizations, I wanted to get your sense as to how the evaluation function differs. Is it more or less the same in terms of learning and accountability, or is it very different?
Okay, then let me answer those last two questions. And actually, I wanted to come also back. I realized I didn't speak to that. Anna's point, Anna from UNEP, who said, you know, I talk about the power of evaluators and that we evaluators are very frustrated. I'm fully aware of that, and that's actually why I chose the topic. And when I spoke about, you know, this power relationship and the negative cycle of defensiveness, this is exactly where both sides are caught. It's where we share actually the same space, and the frustration is on both sides, you know, and that's why being aware that we are very powerful and then using the power wisely is my hope, and my own personal experience has been that that has made really a difference to be less frustrated on our side, and actually less frustrated on the side of those whose programs we evaluate. Susan's question about who evaluates the evaluators. There is one tool which is called the peer reviews, where evaluators go and sort of as a group to visit the evaluation office of another institution. This is instituted in the DAC evaluation network in the UN system. In the multilateral development banks, it's not fully established because we are a very small group. So, you know, if you keep on evaluating each other, maybe we're a bit too close to each other. But so there is a system where, you know, we can assess how well we function. Quite often the criteria used are independence, credibility, and utility. I've been part of two of such peer reviews. Once it was my office that was peer reviewed, and once I was participating in a peer review. And a third time I was supposed to lead the peer review of UNEP and UN Habitat, but then I got the job that I have now, and it was a bit hard to do that during the first couple of weeks. So there is that part of who evaluates the evaluators. The other thing that I was talking about a little bit earlier is that if in the long term we do come to having a professional standard, something like when you compare it with the audit profession, where I've actually worked only 1 year. I haven't started as an auditor. I have to say that it's a profession I would not feel comfortable with. But the audit profession is established that you can study to become an auditor, both from university onwards, and then there are national programs that you have to go through of accreditation, you have to pass exams, and there's at the international level an organization that's called INTOSAI that accredits auditors that work internationally. That is a professional structure where you would have a certain degree of certainty that people are working towards the same professional standards. The evaluation profession is still too young. It's very diverse. People come from very, very different streams of learning, they come out of different faculties, they come out of different practices. So for the last, I would say 20 plus years, there have been discussions about how would we arrive at something like this. If you go back to the journals of the American Evaluation Association of the early 90s, there are articles on this question, and these questions have come back again and again. And here in Canada, the Canadians have adopted professional standards. They have an accreditation program. For me as an international evaluator, the question is, if each country would adopt their own standards, maybe this would be a stepping stone to arrive at international standards, or it would actually divide and fragment our profession further. And that's something, I don't know what the right answer is. If it would lead to fragmentation, obviously that would be very sad, because then it would mean you would be accredited maybe in one place and you don't get accredited in the other place, and how do we compare those standards? But that would be another way of how the evaluators are evaluated. Whether your peers like what you do and your supervisor doesn't, that might be more of a performance management issue, and I don't want to go into that. The last question on, and sorry I didn't catch your name, on corporate culture and how evaluation differs. There's certain things that are very, very similar, accountability and learning, and the evaluation techniques, the tools, the methods, the rigorous approach and all of that. That stays the same. The part that does differ is that the corporate culture and how it reacts to evaluation is very different. For example, looking at the Asian Development Bank, where there is a certain way of communicating, where you can sometimes actually convey very difficult messages if you convey them in a way that people can accept without losing their face. Then they can accept your evaluation findings and they will be open to that. If you do it in a more direct, confrontational way, that's when the shutters go down and people reject whatever you say. It could be even in their interest, but they will just simply not hear it. By contrast, and I moved from Asian Development Bank to IPDET, IPDET is a small fund. It's sort of, it looks at itself as a catalyst. It's funding things that are innovative. So they're very, very interested in learning. And when I was working there, the colleagues on the operational side were sort of saying, like, we would want to get much more out of evaluation, but the evaluation office was very independent and said, no, we are arm's length and we don't want to have too much contact with you. So that is the sort of type of changes you can see between institutions. The practice itself is it's very adaptable. I've carried my toolkit from one institution to the other.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a real treat for us. And I also want to say we are thankful you're coming here and speaking to us. Also shows the support of the Independent Evaluation Group of the World Bank for IPDET. And we are proud and pleased and honored to have had you here today.